Tonight, we begin with a development that senior advocacy groups had feared, policy experts had warned about, and millions of retirees had prayed would never come. A decision that unfolded not over months of public debate, but in a matter of days. Days that will reshape retirement planning for generations. Days that will alter the financial future of over 70 million Americans. Days that could fundamentally change what it means to grow old in this country. What Congress did this week crossed a line that advocacy organizations had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, seniors and their families did not hesitate. They responded with outrage, confusion, and demands for answers. For months now, there had been signals, not official announcements, not formal press releases, just signals, that lawmakers were preparing something unprecedented. Congress has been divided, yes, but they have been remarkably unified in their silence about this particular measure. Their negotiations have followed a certain secrecy, a discretion, almost a deliberate opacity. But what set off alarm bells among senior advocacy groups this week was that even those quiet signals went completely dark. Policy analysts who monitor legislative activity know the indicators. The sudden removal of a bill from committee schedules, the closed-door meetings with no press access, the unusual bipartisan handshakes in the hallways, the sudden absence of lobbyist pushback. All of that went quiet, and whenever Congress goes quiet on something this significant, it means something is about to get very, very loud. Senior citizens across America deserve to know what happened behind those closed doors. And tonight, we're going to break it all down for you. Early Tuesday morning, legislative tracking services detected what they described as an expedited procedural motion, including language that had not been publicly circulated in over 18 months. These are the kinds of provisions that Congress only attaches when they are signaling something very specific: budgetary urgency, program restructuring, or fundamental benefit modifications. Observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Congress was changing its posture on senior entitlements. And when elected officials shift their approach to programs affecting 70 million people without explanation, even by small measures, the American public pays attention. The bill in question, buried within a larger spending package, contains provisions that directly impact Social Security payment schedules, Medicare eligibility windows, and prescription drug pricing mechanisms. These aren't minor technical adjustments. These are structural changes that will touch nearly every American over the age of 62, and millions more who are planning for their retirement. The statement issued by the National Council on Aging tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Advocate after advocate, following emergency conference calls, described Congress's move as reckless, poorly communicated, and perhaps most importantly, potentially devastating to fixed-income households. But legislative maneuvering only works if the public remains uninformed. Seniors and their advocates are not remaining silent. In fact, their response today was among the most coordinated we've seen in decades of entitlement reform debates. Here's what we know. Within 48 hours of the bill's passage, advocacy groups mobilized legal teams. These weren't the standard lobbying efforts. These were emergency action committees, organizations that seniors only activate when they are preparing to mount constitutional challenges. Phones in congressional offices are ringing off the hook. Email servers are crashing under the weight of constituent messages, and town halls are being demanded across every state in the union. Tonight, sources on Capitol Hill confirmed that the new law restructures payment timelines for Social Security recipients, including cost of living adjustments that had recently been scheduled for automatic increases based on inflation calculations. Congress acted before advocacy groups could mount organized opposition. They modified the Medicare enrollment window. They adjusted prescription drug negotiation frameworks. They restructured supplemental benefit calculations that were likely preparing to increase based on economic indicators. In other words, Congress targeted the very mechanisms that protect seniors from inflation, the calculations that would have made automatic adjustments operational. This is what made advocacy groups' warnings so urgent. Congress's move wasn't just procedural, it was actionable. It represented the kind of legislative change that could affect millions of bank accounts if left unchallenged. And senior advocates, understanding that fully, responded with force, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't file frivolous complaints. They didn't issue empty threats. They contacted constitutional law experts. They engaged financial planning organizations. They reached out to every media outlet willing to cover this story. And here's where the story becomes even more troubling. Analysts now believe that Congress's latest move was designed to test the political engagement of the senior voting bloc after years of pandemic disruption. Lawmakers wanted to see whether retirees would remain passive. But instead, the opposite happened. Seniors didn't stay quiet. They organized a response that was so rapid, so coordinated, that even veteran congressional staffers noticed. You don't get Capitol Hill's attention easily. But today, America's seniors did. Policy experts speaking with our sources under anonymity described Congress's strategy as reform by obscurity, a way to implement changes while public attention focused elsewhere. But seniors proved today that they remain both vigilant and vocal. Their responses were not only passionate, they were informed so precisely that specific provisions were cited in constituent calls within hours of the bill's passage. That detail matters because it shows seniors are not passive recipients of government benefits. It shows that retirees are not simply bystanders in their own financial futures. They are active participants. They are engaged citizens. They are voters who will remember. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of the law's impact. Social Security recipients will see changes affecting approximately 69 million Americans, forcing budget recalculations for households already on fixed incomes. Medicare beneficiaries, including those who enrolled in the last 36 months, will face modified coverage parameters. Supplemental Security income recipients, operating on the narrowest financial margins, reportedly face formula adjustments used by the government to calculate monthly benefits. This wasn't just a budget adjustment. This wasn't just a technical correction. This was structural reform. This was a fundamental recalculation. And recalculation is the one thing seniors on fixed incomes have struggled to absorb since inflation began climbing. For every protection that had been built into these programs, Congress has now introduced something that complicates financial planning. Retirement security that took decades to build can unravel much faster than anyone imagines. Remember, lawmakers thought seniors wouldn't notice mid-session legislation. They thought retirees would be focused on healthcare appointments and family visits. They thought a procedural vote would slip through without significant media coverage. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Seniors are organizing at levels not seen since the 1980s. Advocacy groups are coordinating across state lines. Media outlets are finally covering what was supposed to remain invisible. The playbook that worked for decades is no longer working, and Congress is starting to realize that the constituency they underestimated is the one they should have feared the most. What makes this moment so significant and so unpredictable is that Congress's latest move happened at a time when lawmakers are under tremendous electoral pressure. Budget hawks want spending reductions. Progressives want benefit expansions. Moderates want compromise measures. Election-focused members want issues that disappear from headlines. Congressional leadership is balancing these demands while facing a restless electorate that punishes perceived attacks on seniors. And when legislators in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. They're doing it because they calculated, perhaps incorrectly, that acting quietly was safer than acting transparently. The White House statement, now circulating through official channels, was designed to signal that the administration is not willing to allow confusion to dominate the narrative. Officials said plainly that the legislation was consistent with responsible fiscal management. That is diplomatic language for, we knew this would be controversial and we're prepared to defend it. You don't usually hear that preemptive tone from officials unless something serious is at stake. The question now is whether that defense will satisfy the millions of Americans whose retirement calculations just changed. Initial indications suggest the answer is a resounding no. Meanwhile, The Senate Majority Leader addressed reporters in a brief, carefully worded statement tonight. He said, "These adjustments reflect fiscal realities that every American household understands." He said, "We remain committed to the long-term sustainability of programs seniors depend on." And he said, "No senior will see their core benefits eliminated." These are not reassurances. These are carefully crafted statements from a legislative body that understands just how politically dangerous this territory has become. The phrase core benefits is doing a lot of heavy lifting. What about supplemental benefits? What about cost of living adjustments? What about the thousands of dollars in annual income that don't count as core, but absolutely count in seniors' bank accounts? Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Congress's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with the primary legislation, the Department of Health and Human Services also announced a review of Medicare Advantage program structures. The Treasury Department signaled potential adjustments to survivor benefit calculations. The Social Security Administration increased processing timelines for appeals targeting benefit disputes. All of this happened within the same 10-day period. When multiple agencies move simultaneously, it means something larger is underway. This appears to be a coordinated effort to restructure the entire framework of senior support programs, piece by piece, agency by agency, before anyone can mount a unified response. Analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Congress is preparing for long-term entitlement reform negotiations. Another is that lawmakers are attempting to establish political cover for deeper cuts in the next legislative session. A third possibility, the one worrying advocates the most, is that Congress is attempting to normalize the idea that benefits previously considered untouchable can be modified without electoral consequence. But today, seniors took that assumption off the table. They didn't accept the changes passively. They didn't wait for advocacy groups to act on their behalf. They didn't assume someone else would fight this battle. They mobilized immediately. What we're watching now is a test of political will. Congress wants to see whether they can reshape entitlements without facing electoral consequences. Seniors want to show that their votes still matter. Advocacy organizations want to prevent a precedent that makes future cuts easier. And financial planners want to prevent the chaos that comes when millions of households must suddenly recalculate their futures. Tonight, we've heard from policy experts who are now monitoring congressional responses to the public backlash. They say phone lines in key congressional offices have been overwhelmed since Tuesday. They say staff members are reporting constituent anger unlike anything they've experienced on domestic policy. And they say Congress's decision to move quietly is likely part of a broader strategy intended to avoid exactly this kind of public engagement. But seniors are not backing down. In fact, seniors are escalating. Their response today, immediate, informed, and unrelenting, sent a message to Congress that they will not be invisible, and it sent a message to every elected official that attacking senior programs carries a political price. As the days go on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Congress hoped to achieve with this legislative maneuver. But what we do know is that the advocacy community's response was timely. It prevented the changes from passing without public awareness. It established that seniors will organize to defend their interests. And it demonstrated that quiet legislation can become very loud very quickly. What happens next will depend on what Congress does in the next few weeks. If they engage transparently with senior concerns, this moment will be remembered as a wake-up call. If they continue the path of quiet restructuring, advocacy groups have already shown they are prepared. They have shown they are ready to respond. They have shown they are ready to fight. And tonight, for the first time in years, Congress appears to be uncertain. Capitol Hill is quiet, too quiet. And when Congress is quiet, it means they are recalculating. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, lawmakers learned something they have learned many times before. Seniors vote, seniors remember, and seniors will not be silent. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Congress underestimated the people they serve. Seniors will not accept changes made in darkness. And the fight for retirement security has only just begun. And we will be here, watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.